Hi everyone, welcome to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I am Rajni Bharara, your host, and today we have a topic that strikes at the very heart of the American dream: birthright citizenship, a legal principle rooted in the 14th Amendment. It has long been a cornerstone of US immigration policy, but now it's under fire. Now, before I say more about it, I would like to read out this very important disclaimer, which is here on the screen. By watching our videos, you agree and understand that the information provided by our experts and attorneys, including comments and replies from users, is not legal advice. Use of information is at your own risk. All right, after this very important disclaimer, welcome back, everyone. Today, we are going to dive into a very important topic, like I said. And to talk about that topic, we have none other than Jonathan Wasden, a renowned immigration litigation attorney with years of experience navigating the complex intersection of law and policy. Together, we'll unpack the implications of the lawsuit challenging President Trump's policies and its potential ripple effects on immigrant communities. What's at stake? How might this case shape the future of citizenship rights in America? And most importantly, what does this mean for immigrants today and in the years to come? So, without any further ado, let me give a very warm welcome to John. So, John, welcome back to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. It's always a pleasure having you. And today we have a very important topic to talk about. So, welcome back again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. John, without wasting any time, I directly would like to jump into my very first question, which is that is Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship constitutional?
I don't think there's very many people who think it is. I think the general consensus is this is something he did just to beat his chest and show his anti-immigrant following that he's doing something. So the general consensus, like I say, is that this will more than likely be invalidated by a court, and it'll be the end of it. Now, in the interim, until that happens, the real impact is going to be, if you're applying for a passport for a newly born child, the State Department may not issue it right away until a court order comes down telling them that this executive order is unconstitutional.
Okay, but John, can a president really change who becomes an American president? Oh, sorry, American citizen?
No, it's governed by the Constitution and it's governed by statute. And to the extent that the Constitution doesn't contemplate every possibility, the statute takes over. What Trump and his administration are trying to do is they're taking the very, very clear language in the 14th Amendment that says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state where they reside. What they're saying is that and subject to the jurisdiction thereof clause somehow allows them to prevent the people being born in the country who are born to non-permanent residents and non-US citizenship. But when you look at the history of that clause, what they're really referring to is diplomats who have diplomatic immunity, who are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And diplomats' kids, when they're born in the US, have never been granted US citizenship. And so, they're really pushing against common sense, the plain language of the law, and also history. And there's just really no angle that they can take on this that's going to be appealing to a court.
Okay. But then why do you think they did it in the first place? Like, why did they think about doing it if it's not going to go forward?
Yeah, so I mean, Trump's base, they are very upset about illegal immigration from the southern border, and that's understandable. Especially, if you're living along a border state, that's an issue that you're going to be voting on and you want tougher enforcement on. They were also keyed in and aware of the fact that there have been clinics and hospitals set up mostly catering to Chinese clientele, where the Chinese clientele will come on a visitor visa shortly before babies due, have the baby here, recuperate, get citizenship for their child, and then go home. And those are the two scenarios that they're trying to prevent and they're trying to stop, is the illegal immigration and the birther tourism, for lack of a better term. But in the mix, anybody who's on a non-immigrant visa here legally and lawfully is also most likely going to be impacted by this executive order in the interim.
Okay. Okay. But then, John, also I would like to know from you that how could the government legally stop granting automatic citizenship to children born in the US?
So I think the way that they will do that, the only way they really can do that is through the issuance of passports or the non-issuance of passports. And so, if you were to apply for a passport for your child right now, proving citizenship would be an issue potentially if you're a non-immigrant or you don't have legal status, until that court order comes down saying, no, this is not legitimate.
Okay. But then has the 14th Amendment ever been challenged in a similar way before?
No, probably because it's so clear on its face, nobody's ever thought that this was a good idea to do. Just looking at the language of the 14th Amendment, it's abundantly clear. And it's, the history of it shows that it was designed to grant citizenship to anybody born in the US, regardless of the status of their parents. So, the people that it affected back in the day were, not documented aliens, right? They didn't come here with a visa. Their parents didn't come here with a visa, rather, and they were born to people who didn't have visas or legal status other than slaves. And so to say that the executive order, has found some gaping loophole in the 14th Amendment is kind of stretching it a lot, actually. And so I just don't see a whole lot of courts having patience and time for this. I think it's going to be something that gets kicked out very quickly probably in the first month and a half of the Trump administration. They'll take a beating on this one. But it's more of a distraction, I think, from what's going on with the grander issues within the Trump administration on immigration. And it's also indicative of where he's headed. So, there's a lot of buzz earlier about, Elon Musk saying great things about the H-1B visa, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was some optimism that maybe Trump's second time around wouldn't be so bad for immigration or legal immigration and high-skilled immigration. But, the birthright citizenship issue and the extreme vetting issue, all of that's lining up to show that no, it's just going to be just as bad as it was the first time.
Or maybe worse?
Yeah, it could be worse. I think what they learned from their last time around is, what not to do. They jumped in and rushed into a bunch of things without going through the right process. I think this time they've figured out how to game the system a little more effectively.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's wait what actually, happens there. And the first day itself had so many things coming. So we weren't really somewhere we were expecting, but we weren't really expecting this much to happen. But then let's see what really happens. But then, John, I would also like to know from you that, how might this challenge to birthright citizenship impact future presidential actions?
So probably not much, because the other court cases are going to be brought against his policies are on issues where the law is not so clear and potentially not quite so favorable to plaintiffs. The extreme vetting piece, that is something where courts are more likely to give the executive branch a lot more leeway and a lot more flexibility to accomplish their goal of protecting the U.S. So, as obvious it is what they're trying to do with that extreme vetting, I think the courts are probably going to be more inclined to let that happen and, let him have his executive order on that issue.
Okay, okay. And could this set a precedent for presidents to reinterpret constitutional provisions through executive orders? Do you think?
Where they're clear like this, I don't think so. Where there's a little bit of ambiguity, there's always the possibility that they can find a loophole or they can find some exception that a court's going to agree with. But with this case, the language is so abundantly clear, the history is so abundantly clear, and the reason for the amendment is so clear. I just don't see it, getting any traction with the court. Even if they get lucky and they get a Trump appointee from the first administration as a district court judge, that first trial court level, any court of appeals that hears this, I think is going to shoot it down.
Okay, okay. But John, even if, let's say, it goes through, and then what might happen to the children born in the US?
Well, that's a great question, right? Because they're born here, they've been here for a while, at least over 180 days, without any type of visa. There's no provision in the law that says that if you're born in the U.S., you're granted immediate or automatic residency status, right? Or non-immigrant status if your parents are non-immigrants. And so, what is their status? That the law doesn't anticipate what that would be because the law has always assumed that they would be citizens if they're born here. So there's a lot of questions that are going to be raised if this was, allowed to go through, and you would find the odd circumstance or the paradoxical circumstance where an infant born here in the U.S. who can't even speak would have a ground of inadmissibility for having overstayed and been in the country without authorization for more than 180 days. And that just seems incredibly crazy that they would do that, but that would be a natural consequence of, birthright citizenship being destroyed.
Yeah. And do you think would this create a group of children, who don't belong actually anywhere?
Possibly, yeah. But again, I don't think this is going to stand. But hypothetically, yeah, it could cause problems like that.
Okay, okay. So moving forward, I would like to also know about, how will calling cartels and gangs terrorist groups change immigration enforcement?
So when you throw out the magical T word, the terrorism word, it does loosen up certain funding within the federal government to do emergency, actions. It also gives the federal government a little bit more flexibility in what tools and what things they bring to combat the issue. By labeling it terrorism, theoretically, they're opening up activation of military to combat terrorism. Historically, if you look at it, it wouldn't be the first time that the country has brought the military in to the southern border to fight what amounts to a terrorist organization. Back in the early 1900s, there was Pancho Villa. He was a Mexican rebel that was leading border incursions across and attacking settlements on the U.S. side of the border. And we sent the American Army down there, and they had the punitive expeditions fighting in Mexico, chasing down Pancho Villa. And so there is precedent for using the military along the border. Whether or not we're going to get into that remains to be seen. I would hope not. I think that would be a catastrophe. Having been in the military, in my lifetime, I just don't see that as an operation that we would be set to excel in, because we've learned one thing from the U.S. military over the past 20 years, and that is fighting an insurgency or fighting what's called asymmetrical warfare is something that we're just not very good at, and no country is terribly good at. So it would be a catastrophe if we sent the military south of the border.